Good afternoon. I am Ann Sayas, a member of the Archives Committee. People Program is celebrating its 50th anniversary this year, and we're trying to find out information about the founding and the early years of our history. One of the things that we want to do is to find about Sister Alice Marie Macmurdo. And we have with us today 3 sisters who knew her quite well, and they will share some of their experiences in knowing her with you. Sister Janine, would you begin, please?
Thank you, Ann. My name is Sister Janine Beniger, and I am a Sister of St. Joseph. I am also a full-time volunteer teacher here at People Program, which was founded by our dear Sister Alice Marie.
I'm Kathleen Pittman. I'm a Sister of St. Joseph also, and I have been, I should say, since she's deceased, a wonderful friend of Sister Alice Marie for many, many years.
I'm Sister Margaret Maggio. I'm a Sister of St. Joseph, and I was a student of Sister Alice Marie.
All right, Sister Janine, would you begin with some experiences of your knowing Sister Alice Marie?
I would be happy to do that, very happy. My first encounter with Sister Alice Marie was just as the new semester of my senior year was beginning. I remember standing around in the hall with other students, and we were setting up our lockers and comparing our schedules and visiting and reconnecting. And there was talk that a new sister was coming to us from Baton Rouge to be part of our faculty. Her name was Sister Alice Marie. It seems like those who knew her, don't know, maybe some students knew the students in Baton Rouge, they seemed to like her. And then some of us were standing around. This nun in a habit comes scurrying by like she was destined for a room. And she was going to her homeroom. We saw her, and as we stood there talking, somebody said, "There goes Sam." Now, Sam was the nickname that students had given her. Those are the initials for her name. And that was kind of delightful to hear she had a nickname like that.
Mm-hmm.
We have to remember that in those days, my day, you did not address a sister or even think of a sister without her title. And if you had a nickname for her, you were very careful about where you used it. Anyway, she heard one of the students say, "There is Sister Alice, there is Sam." And as she turned to look, there was a twinkle in her eye and a little smile on her face. But she did not stop to scold us or correct us, and that spoke volumes. That was very impressive for us. We thought, she is student friendly, and so she was endearing from the beginning. She seemed amused. I remember at that time that little glimmer in her eye really struck us. She was my senior homeroom teacher, and she also was my math teacher. Well, let me say this, she tried to teach me math. And she was also my religion teacher. One of the things that struck me is that even though we struggled with the new math, it was called at that time, I never got it, and so did the rest of the students in the class. Many of us struggled, but I never saw her impatient. I never saw her frustrated or in any way not really understanding our plight. It was a new program. Before it used to be algebra in one year, geometry in another, but this was like a combination of it all. And I understand she was really quite intelligent, or very gifted in math. Anyway, it must have been terrible for her not to have students who were catching on. We did not catch on. Okay. She taught religion too. I was in her class, and I remember being awed by her perspective. It was liberating, and not the usual, you can't do this, you shouldn't do that, thou shall not. She treated us as adults, which was awesome and amazing to me. One thing I remember clearly was what I learned from her after I graduated from St. Joseph and was a member of the community. My senior year was a year that was integrated for the first time. It was 62 to 63. We probably remember those were troubling years, lots of racial protests and threats and violence and anger. And when the first day of school arrived, we did not know what we were going to encounter, what trouble there would be. And yet, surprisingly, there was no protest, no nothing. The parents rode around the school. We were at the new academy. We could see the parents riding around, but there was nothing to be fearful of. I found out later from the sisters who lived in the academy that they had tried their hardest to stave off any kind of trouble or unrest so the students wouldn't be affected by that. And yet the sisters themselves were harassed. In the community, they were receiving phone calls in the middle of the night, day and night. People would accost them on the street. Students did not see any of that, for which I'm grateful. From Alice, I learned how she managed to deal with the attacker, the verbal attacker, the one who wanted to express anger and disapproval of what the nuns were doing to St. Joseph Academy. She said she would stop the person who was the accuser long enough to ask, "Would you like me to listen to you, listen to my reasoning like I am listening to yours?" If we can have a respectful conversation with both of us sharing, if we can't do that, I can't continue to talk with you. And if the person showed signs that they were not willing to have a respectful exchange, she would simply excuse herself and walk away. Now that to me really was impressive. I learned later on what a quiet, passionate, radical advocate for human dignity and human rights Alice was. Again, I never saw her lose her composure. She was always mild-mannered, and when I say that to some of my sisters, they chuckle, like they knew a different side of her than what I knew, and I will never know. But I'm so glad to have had the influence of this sister in my student days. She really had a profound effect on me. I didn't see much of her after I graduated from St. Joseph because I entered the convent, and people in the novitiate did not interact with the professed sisters, so I didn't see her anymore. I had more opportunities to get to know her and interact with her some years later. All I can say is that I am so pleased that Alice is my sister. She and Sister Aloysius, or Sister Jane as some of us remember her, made such a prophetic move in integrating St. Joseph Academy, which caused white flight, leading to the eventual closing of our school. The community, the CSJ community, wanted a racially balanced student body, and the student population was fast becoming mostly black. Unfortunately, many students left St. Joseph Academy and went to other girls' high schools in the city. I think all the time it would have been a wonderful testimony to the gospel values if those schools had stood in solidarity with us at St. Joseph. But it was not to be. And it was a profound witness, nevertheless. And I continue to feel enormous pride in my sisters. Thank you.
Thank you, Janine. That was a remarkable story about Sister Alice Marie. It really helps us get an understanding of her as a person and her as an instrument of social justice.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Sister Kathleen.
Well, I just was thinking as Janine was speaking, how much I will say some of the same things, which just means that they're true. Alice Marie, I guess I can say, to sum it up, would be that she was a great human being. She was somebody who was truly human, in and out, and yet she didn't make any deal out of it. She just was who she was. She loved life, and she got others to love it. I first met her when I was only 13 years old. And we had just moved to Baton Rouge from New Orleans. And that had summer before my 8th grade, I was lost. I mean, Baton Rouge, it could have been Timbuktu for all I knew. I knew nobody there except my family. And there was nobody my age. All my friends were in New Orleans. The school that I had loved was in New Orleans. And so I was really a very sad human being. And so we went the day to get registered, my mother and my 2 younger sisters and myself. And we had been told, you know, that the sisters will take you in and register you. I was really registered already, in a sense. My dad had called and enrolled us. I didn't know the Sisters of St. Joseph at all, because they lived in a different, the ones who were in New Orleans lived in a different part of the city than I did. We went to the door, and who should open it but Sister Alice Marie. And she had that little smile on her face that Janine talked about, and a twinkle in her eye. She impressed me right away. And she gave us her name, and she said, if y'all come to register? And we said yes. And so we went in. My mother kept calling her mother, which was the title that the Ursuline nuns had at that time. And I kept trying to tell my mother, no, it's sister, not mother. You know, 13, you can tell your mother everything she doesn't know anymore. So anyway, we went in, and right away she was warm and friendly and helpful. She introduced me, she could see right away I was very ill at ease, and she introduced me to a group of girls who were going to be in my class, and they had been at St. Joseph since they were real little. And we hit it off immediately. They were just cut off of the same cloth I was. So we were friends and stayed friends throughout my whole high school years, and some of them are still friends of mine. Anyway, to be received like that by her made such an impression on us. I always wanted to find out where she taught in the high school, and I wanted to see where she was. I wanted to know more about her. And that wasn't, in a sense it was. She was the coach of the high school football team, high school basketball team.
Yeah.
And so me and my little friends, we all went to the games, every game. We were the cheering section. If nobody else was there, we cheered them on. And so we got to know her too and see how she worked with the students. And we all, you know, just grew to love her very much. She was young. I'm sure she was not more than her late 20s, if that much, at the time. And as the coach of the basketball team, a lot of kids got to know her real well, because she was always there working with them after school, and we would go after school too. We'd hope they let us play basketball. And anyway, that was the beginning of my meeting with Sister Alice Marie. She taught algebra and other math and science and religion. And this is a while before Janine was there. This was 1949. And I hated math. I had always hated it. And so I didn't do that well in her algebra class. And one time I was talking to the person behind me, really asking them, where were we, you know, in this? And I felt this little piece of chalk hit me. I turned around, she had thrown a piece of chalk at me. She was laughing. I said, well, I'll laugh too. So it was the only time I really saw her take out any frustration, but she was trying to explain something, and here I was talking to my next door neighbor. All through high school, we had her for a teacher. She made me love science. I can't say I ever loved math, and still don't. but she made me love science. And I even thought of going into majoring in it later on, but decided not to. Because she was the person she was, she influenced me a whole lot in terms of what I wanted to do with my life. And it really wasn't until my junior year that I began to think about possibly becoming a religious sister, a sister of St. Joseph only. Some of the others were thinking the same thing. There were 5 of us that entered the convent together that September of 1954, our graduation year. And she spent the whole summer before that making our clothes, our postulant clothes, because if it had been left up to me, there would be no clothes. And she was so involved with us. You know, we really got to know her better then as just another human being. She was always an advocate for justice, and you'll see me say that more as the thing goes on. But she advocated for justice, whether it be for the individual person or whether it be for a whole nation of people. She was strong in social justice. During high school, not only did we have Sister Alice Marie, who was a good teacher, but also Sister Lydia, who was Peter at the time, and Francine later on, Jane Louise, Mother Aloysius, who became known as Sister Jane. All of these people were that kind of person. They were advocates for justice. They were wonderful human beings. They influenced you a lot. And so their influence, as I said, brought 5 of us to the convent. In the 60s, we all entered the convent, not in the 60s, in 54 we entered the convent. And that was a struggle. It was not like the sisters that I knew from Baton Rouge. And I said, wait a moment, what am I doing here? You know, I don't want to be like these sisters that I'm seeing now, except for one who is still living, Sister Kathleen. At the time, she was Sister Regis, and she was a great influence on me. But in the 60s, when we were in the convent and already teaching, the Vatican Council was going on. And all of them were very much influenced by the Vatican Council. We, as a community, had speakers come and talk to us about the different things that the Vatican Council was promoting and bringing into life. And so they all wanted us to know more about it. And so we really did hook, line, and sinker become promoters of the Vatican Council and of all the wonderful teachings that they were teaching. And new understanding of scripture and liturgy and all of the things, some of which Sister Janine mentioned. With that, when we decided to integrate the school, and Alice was one of the big promoters of that, we knew that this was the just thing to do and the thing we wanted to do. We started in 62, 63. And we had been told before that we shouldn't talk about this with the students because they were going to get all worried and they're going to go home and talk to their parents and get them worried. But I remember, and they said, you can't do it. It would be sinful to do it.
Ooh.
So I said, wait a moment, something's wrong here. And I went to the priest in confession and I told him what they were telling us, and he said, don't listen to them. She said, you probably need to talk to the students about this. This was the year before. And so we did, and it was a big difference, you know. And then they felt free. See, and Alice was the one who promoted that kind of thing. Freedom for the children to express themselves.
It's interesting. Can I add this?
Sure.
I don't remember anything about the Vatican II, and I had religion with her, but I don't remember hearing anything about Vatican II.
You may have been having it without realizing it,
Maybe.
but maybe not. I don't know. I know that some of the things they were promoting came from Vatican Council, which I found out later too. I didn't realize that. One of the things Alice did to really help the young black students who were there to feel more a part, she sponsored a Black Arts Festival. And the students, some of them were dancers, some were poets, some were singers, some played music, and so they got a chance to promote their artistic ability. And it did so much, not just to the other students, but to the parents of the students, to help them realize what wonderful, talented, giving young people we had. And so they all, I think it helped a tremendous lot in getting at least the students to accept the integration. Now, I can't say that in those 4 years that I was, well, more than 4, I was there till 74, and it started in 63. So those years that I was there, certainly there were problems. And at the very beginning, as Janine mentioned, we were called by the people from the White Citizens Council on the phone and asked them, would we want to marry a black man? And I said, well, when I got one of those calls, I said, actually, no, I don't want to marry any man. I've decided to be a sister of St. Joseph. I didn't know what to say, but it sounded like it was true. Even though I think many times they did whatever they could to keep the students from being upset about anything. At the same time, there were things that couldn't be helped. We had a dance in the early days of the integration. It was for the sophomores. Each class had their little dance. And the sophomores, we felt, were too young to have a date. So we told them, you know, we'll invite, you give us names of boys in some of the high schools, and we'll have this school invite them to come. So we did. And we ended up, of course, having a number of the students and a number of the young boys that had been invited. Only one black student signed up to come. And we said, now how are we going to help her to feel welcome? You know, and what are the other students going to do? Are they going to be afraid? That night, a cross was burned on right near us, and not the actual property of the school, but right next to us. And it was Gayat was her name, but I can't remember her first name. And she was a real advocate for stopping the integration, you know, and that's going to be all kinds of ridiculous things. And so she had a group out there walking in the outside of the school, or outside of the gym where the dance was, and they were all saying the rosary. And this was just to pray to God to stop this integration. The children inside the gym didn't hear any of that, and they had a wonderful time. And now it's true, we had to let the young girl who came, whose name I at this moment can't remember, to bring a date with her, because otherwise she wouldn't have had anybody who would ask her to dance. The children were too afraid. I mean, they didn't know what was going on outside, but they were perfectly happy inside. And after a while, you know, they danced and people began to maybe talk to them and so forth. But it was the beginning, and those things were hard. You know, those things were difficult. And there were other things, like when President Kennedy was shot. And I remember I was teaching sophomore religion. And it was at lunchtime, and you know, we had one of those split lunch program. And so my class was in class, and one of the black students, who was a wonderful young girl, she just put her head down on her desk and just started sobbing. And so did a lot of them, white and black. And then outside they were changing like lockers. And I was standing by the door, and I heard one of the white girls say to the other one, yeah, I heard that. That's good. they ought to kill all of them. It went through me like somebody had shot me, like they shot him. And I would say, what a time to say that, you know. But it showed me things aren't perfect. Things are far from, you know, really well straight. And yet, it was just a sign that this was not going to be okay, you know, by tomorrow, by the next day. Sister Alice, besides though, this Black Student Council, I mean the Black Artistic Festival, she was a mentor for the Student Council. And she got the Student Council members together and they went to all the different elementary schools in the New Orleans area where we taught, wanted to speak to the 8th graders. And they talked to them about coming to St. Joseph Academy. And they talked to them about how wonderful the school was and all the things that they learned and how happy they were that they went to school there. And we did get a number of students from that, both white and black. Alice then and I taught together. That was the 60s and the early 70s. And then she went on to teach at, she went on to be a member of our council, our sisters who were the council for the New Orleans area. And again, her whole love of social justice came out, and she began to promote things that would really be just social justice in our community as well as in our city. And the civil rights movement was going on, and she and Sister Francine, another one of our sisters, went down and participated in it. So did I and some of the other sisters on the faculty, some of the faculty members who weren't sisters. And so we began to get involved in the civil rights movement. Plenty of it was her influence. She left the council and she went to teach. This was right after that. And she went to teach in not Morgan City.
New Iberia.
New Iberia, thank you. In the sugarcane fields. There was talk that that was real country area, and as far as integration went, they were very far behind it. And many of the black people who worked in the fields were treated like slaves. You know, they didn't know how to read and write, many of them. They weren't taught that, weren't allowed to learn that. And so she and Sister Francine decided to start a school for literacy for black members of the gangs that worked in the sugarcane fields. They started coming. First they were afraid, and she assured them that they didn't have to be afraid. She was going to take care of them. And they came and they worked, they began to learn to read and write. They began to learn all kinds of different things and learn how to read. And so it was a wonderful program. And I don't know if it's still going on, because when she and Sister Francine left, because they really were getting to the point where it was too much for them, they sold it to another group of sisters. And so I don't know what happened since. Now it makes me want to find out. But while she was at the council, she decided that she felt we needed a program for seniors. The seniors who were not living in nursing homes or even in assisted living, they were still perfectly capable of taking care of themselves, but they were retired from their jobs and so forth. And so she got a student that she had taught at St. Joseph Academy in Baton Rouge, Barbara McCurdy, to work with her. And she said, we want to start a school for seniors. And that's what it became. She wanted something more than just playing bingo and going to the casino, which is what some of the senior groups still do. But, which is okay. but there needed to be more than that. And so she got individuals who were in the program, the people program already, to willing to offer their talents, the skills that they had, to be the classes. And that's how it started. And other members, you know, people joined the people program to be part of those classes. And that's how it began. Very small beginning. I think there were, maybe some of you know better than I do, I think it was about 35 in the classes then. Now it's in the hundreds. And Alice continued to be an advocate for justice. Justice to individual people, to groups of people. And I'm sure she's trying to advocate for that right now. I'm so sure some of those saints that run heaven are saying, okay, Alice, cool it. You know? But she never gave up, and she was always going on to do that. She was an amazing person, and one that highly influenced me, was a mentor for me from the time I was 13 till the time that she died, really. And I am so happy and so grateful for the grace she was in my life.
Thank you. It gives us a wonderful picture of the kind of atmosphere she was able to create to allow people to flourish during their school time or during any time. It was a necessity. Sister Margaret.
Sister Alice Marie was my freshman teacher. First time I met her when I went to St. Joseph Academy. I'm from Baton Rouge. I had the Sisters of St. Joseph at Sacred Heart all my years of going to grammar school, but she never taught. I never knew her then, but when I was in the 9th grade and I went to the academy, we were all so excited because a bunch of girls that graduated with me from 8th grade came to the academy. And so we couldn't wait to go to high school. So we get there and, you know, we're so welcomed by all the students. Sister Alice had the freshman class, who was the year before, so they would be sophomores, welcome us. They were all in a big room downstairs. And they all said, we want to welcome y'all to St. Joseph Academy. You know, we had never had a welcome like that. But she prompted that kind of thing because my experience of her was always a welcoming person. Anybody was welcome. She was inclusive. She thought about people, and especially if you were not in the upper class or something like that. She, you know, she was always on the lookout for people who were not in the upper class section of school. But anyway, and I didn't like algebra, and I can just remember myself going to the board and her eyes on me, watching me do the problem, you know, and I would look at her with my face like, I'm not getting it, Sister Alice, and she would come over and encourage me. She was always encouraging you, even if you couldn't do the algebra. But anyway, then she'd send somebody up to help me with it. But that was always my feeling when I was around her. I never heard her put anybody down. It was always to raise people up to a new level. And I think that was a beautiful trait she had. It was in her being. It wasn't like a put-on thing, something she did every now and then. Her being was like to help people, to promote people. And because I remember I was in a play one time, and I had an unusual role. I had to run from the audience and jump on the steps of the stage and say this speech, you know. And I was just like, I had practiced and practiced, you know, so I felt like I did it okay. And then when I, you know, after the play was over and people were talking to us, she came up to me and she said, you were one of the best actors on the stage. Well, of course, that made me feel so good because I was so nervous about doing that role. It just seemed so out of sync with what was going on. But anyway, that's the kind of person she was. And So besides teaching algebra, she also helped us with our May Day, which was a special play that we did every year for the seniors. The sophomore class would do, and she would teach us, you know, what we were supposed to do, and she had other people teaching. We had to dance. She had people teaching us our role in dancing or whatever it was. But she was always there for every practice. She didn't just leave it up to other people. She was in charge, and she saw that things went well. And I admired that in her when I thought about it when I was old enough to think of all these things. But how, you know, she took her role and whatever it was very seriously, and she was with you in it. It wasn't like she was outside of it, you know, like a lot of people tell you what to do and then that's it. Not Alice. She was in there with you. And that would always impress me about her. And she was just a warm person. I didn't live with her in community, but we did have community together when we lived in an apartment on Grand Route St. John. We were in, Kathleen and I were in 2, and she and Franny lived in apartment 5, and we had meals together and prayer together. And so we had a lot of outings, and I was on my sabbatical, so she said, look, I found this in the paper. You can be a friend of City Park. We can garden together. So I said, okay. So we went over to City Park and volunteered to garden. And it was fun, you know, like she would find ways to be with other people. You know, that gave us a chance to meet other people who were gardening too, you know, that were seniors, senior citizens who were retired. I wasn't retired, but Alice and Franny were, because she came straight from the plantation where Kathleen explained all of that. But one of the things that struck me about her work at the plantation, I remember they put her name in the paper there, and they called her a communist. And she said, because I'm helping people, I'm a communist. You know, it just didn't make sense. She says, all I'm doing is teaching them how to read and write. You know, and I'm teaching them what their rights are as human beings. You know, they don't have to be slaves. You know, they can speak up for themselves, but they have to have some kind of education to do that. And that's what she did. And we have this wonderful picture of her sitting with this elderly black man, and she's teaching him. It's a beautiful picture, but it's so her. It's so Alice Marie, you know, being there with the person and educating him with a smile on her face, you know. She was so much into social justice, and every time there was a protest in Washington, if she could make her way there, she and Alice were there on the steps, giving out pamphlets, talking to people about social justice. So wherever there was a need for social justice, somebody to stand up for something, you could be sure Alice and Franny were there. And so I think when you say, was she a person of faith? She had to have great faith, because she had a lot of courage to go on protests. You know, in those days, well, they still do it now. I mean, they can hurt people who are protesting, because some people who are not for what you're protesting against will, you know, knock people out or shoot them. Well, in those days, they weren't doing much shooting, but they could harm you in other ways. And I've always said, boy, she's brave to do that. I don't know if I'd have the courage to do all those things. So I always admired her courage for standing up for justice. And, you know, so I think you have to have a lot of faith to do that. You know, because I think she was a prayerful person. She was a person who worked hard for whatever the need was. She always looked for the need. I remember when I was going into a new ministry, I was going into parish work as religion coordinator, and she started a group of people in our community who wanted to know how to do team ministry. If you're gonna not teach school anymore, how could you work with a team of people and, you know, that everybody felt welcome, included, and could use their gifts and make a contribution to that team. And that's what she taught us. And I was so interested, and it was so, I just said, wow, this is a new way of looking at ministry. And so that was Alice, always looking of new ways. And then she started, like Kathleen said, the people program. And I remember I said, well, since I'm fully employed, I can't go to everything, but I'm going to support what I can. And I remember the first one I went to was at Macmurdo. And she had all these lay people involved in serving the refreshments, you know, a part of it. It was just so much like her. I said, there she is again, starting something new. Of course, we never dreamed it was going to last for this many years, but it was Alice's way of being inclusive. And so I always loved that about her. She always made you feel welcome and at home with whatever. She was always willing to share. And we went on vacations together, and she was just a lot of fun. We went to the Smoky Mountains, and because that's the only thing we could afford. We'd all pool our little money together, and Alice would just be so much fun. She would be relaxed, and she didn't do her protests. We would always like say, Alice, this is just for fun now, don't you get too serious, you know. We would tease her. But she was a good sport, and just a very loving person, a wonderful sister of St. Joseph, and I was proud to be her friend and her sister.
Wow, what wonderful memories of her.
Yes,
She really, really sounds like a very remarkable person.
she was.
She was an advocate, she encouraged, she accepted, she was courageous, she was an innovator, and every one of you talk about how welcoming she was for it.
That's what she was.
Yeah, are there any other comments and things that you want to add or questions that you want to ask one another?
One of the things I don't know how I lost track of this, but when you were talking about how when she would go to protest, I was with her when we went to the Pentagon, and we did civil disobedience.
Oh, you
over
were?
there.
Oh,
Went
I
to
didn't
what?
know that.
Yeah.
To the Pentagon, we did
Oh.
civil
Oh.
disobedience together.
That was,
Yeah, I was living in Minnesota at the time, but we had a group from here and a group from Minnesota that kind of
oh, that.
Plan
Y'all
that
put in
together.
jail?
And what kind of trouble did you get into?
what happens when you do that. No, it was interesting because I was working in a prison at the time. And I consulted with the director of that program. I said, this is what I'm thinking of doing civil disobedience. And she said, well, I want you to know I did that in my youth too. She said, but just remember that, 10 years down the road, you might suddenly lose your job, or you might get something thrown at you that you don't expect. It might be left over from, somebody seeing that you had chosen to do this. I can't say that I have had that experience, but I guess it was always possible. But yeah, that was a profound experience at the time, and
Yeah.
made me realize that, I won't do that again. No, seriously, because I thought, I wanted to make a statement about what we were doing, because I had difficulty with what was happening. It's the Sandinista time, Anyway, I wanted to make a statement about that, but in the end, I felt like it didn't make any difference whether I was there or not there. I just felt like for those who want to do that, that's fine. But it was good to be with my community, community members there and in solidarity. Yeah, completely forgot about that.
Was she tall, short,
Average.
average height?
Average.
Mhm.
Yeah, maybe.
About my height, I would say.
Was she athletic on a living basis? Since she coached basketball?
Yeah,
but-
she did
She
coach.
coached basketball, but actually,
I don't remember her.
she stopped doing that even, I think, at the end of my high school.
Yeah.
Because
I don't think she was athletic.
She wasn't athletic.
she had played basketball.
Well, I
in
know,
high
but in her religious.
No.
Yeah,
no.
but I think she got,
You're right.
well, she had it, when I was in high school, I'm just a year away from Kathleen, we had intramurals. I wanted to be on the basketball team for the school, which was Red Stickers, but I couldn't play for the school, she said, because I was on a CYO team for basketball, volleyball, and softball. I was very athletic. I wanted to be involved in all the sports. She said, well, you would have to give all that up. Well, I didn't want to give it up because if I dropped out of those, then, you know, and I was very active in my parish at the time. And so I would only be playing basketball because they didn't do softball and volleyball at the high school. It was only basketball at the time that I was in high school. And she said, so, but you can be in intramurals. So she got somebody to work with us, and we had intramurals at the school, and I got to be on the team.
Again, another way that she found for
Found
you
a
to
way
be,
for me
to be included.
to
in
be
it.
included.
Yeah.
That was another
That's
way.
what she would do.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And she doesn't take no for an answer either.
No.
Because she would convince you could do it, you
Yeah.
know. She was the one who went before and did it. So if she did it, so could you.
Oh, you've shared some remarkable experiences of a remarkable human being.
Yeah.
And we are so grateful to Sister Alice Marie for all of her qualities, for giving us this people program, which we have enjoyed now for 50 years. Thank you so much for all of your sharing. It's been a wonderful afternoon.
You, Ann.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Ann.
Ann.